Hi, my name is Mike Ratner, and I am the progenitor, I guess, of the Loving Conversations Project. And this is a book proposal as well as early development for a course that would be used for counselors, trainers, and couples therapists. Now, that's not necessarily my background and expertise. However, I'm a social scientist, you could say a social psychologist in the way that I'm uh, creating a backdrop of research, and all of my studies are validated. Not that I did the studies, but my references are solid, and my own ideas and things that I've done in the field of actual action research also are validated. So, this is an outgrowth of my graduate work, my dissertation on communityconversations.com, where I studied uh, organic dialogue groups that talked about social issues and their impacts, but also the communication models. So, taking it a step further, I also wanted to get a closer look at dialogue, interpersonal dialogue, and for different reasons and motivations for myself, I thought it would be beneficial to, look at the next stage for myself, which would be to create models of loving conversations, or study those models that do work. And here it is. So the premise is that if I were to leave a lasting legacy, it would be to help people who have been stagnant in their relationships or are experiencing an inability to communicate clearly and openly. And so loving conversations creates the premise that it's possible, no matter what, really, different, we can come to a conversation from different perspectives and angles, and then through the power and the incentive of having a breakthrough, resolve issues, and to be able to have ultimately a loving conversation. So the premise is that, we may have our different motivations. We want to be as loving and kind as possible. So I'm going to introduce some vocabulary. These are words that I made up. Now, for the most part, they are acronyms. Some are not. They're just basically terminology that I felt would be important to introduce into the work because they kind of, to me, open up, they're a paradigm shift. They open up another realm that would allow us to explore the concept of loving conversations deeper. So the first word is metasphere. Now, I had to create the word metasphere, so this is way before Facebook ever came up with meta. I mean, there's obviously the term out there, and I'm looking at, metaphorically speaking, the term atmosphere, what people might describe as a social climate or the feeling or sense that you get into in a space. For the French, it might be ambiance, and if you're into architecture, you get a sense of what a room space can feel in the design and structure of things. So I look at this in the context of relationship dynamics, and particularly in uh, what my graduate research and community conversations were. And that was the feeling of the room and how we can affect things based on spatial dynamics of creating a welcoming and warm environment. But then what was the quality of the conversations and what was being felt by the participants who were in dialogue? And in this dimension, I think, I did a pretty good job of this. And so I had to create a word called metasphere. And I'm hoping that it's something that will be part of my contribution to the conversation science, like what is the metasphere? What's felt between us? And that's expanded within my current writing. The German word I made up, my one and only German word that I made up, and I don't speak German, ich verstehe ein bisschen, which means I understand very little, and that's about it, called Welt Slosh. I like the word slosh. Welt is word, the world, the world that we're in. And slosh is building, but my referencing of a dwelling, again, of the spatial dynamic. So having some association to our sense of being in this world, so it's reckoning of reality, on the level to where we as participants are having this experience. And so as we can come to know and describe, and coming from different viewpoints and angles, this metasphere can be explored. So the metasphere would be the most immediate dimension of the vibe you might have with someone, or sort of the feeling, it could be a vestibular sense of your gut of what's happening. And that's a great way to come into a space, is sort of really just have an intuitive sense first. So you're checking in within, and then within this dimension, what am I hearing? What am I listening to about myself? What I'm saying about this? Because the metasphere is speaking to you, and you are a contributor to it because you're coming into it perhaps with an attitude or some perspective that's now sort of fixating into the space. And that could be your attitude about somebody, or just sort of an impression, a bias perhaps. But now you have an opportunity to recognize it. So you're actually having what I describe as a real reckoning. And, and David Jubb's work and other people talk about this idea of having a self-awareness that's called I awareness. So it's not so much my projection, but having a sense of my TWA, which I describe as thoughts, words, and actions. So this is kind of a quick summary of my philosophy of how coming into things are, and I'm totally open to interpretation and feedback because I want to expand on this. This is exactly where we can have a quality interaction that informs the metasphere, uh, and therefore has the effect of expanding conscious awareness. So I'm a little bit more informed. I'm attuned to my own thought processes and the quality of my thoughts, the words that I'm saying, and not that the words have to be implicated in something of manipulation or characteristics of persuasion. It's simply being heartfelt and expressing, saying in clear communication what it is. And there's a consideration. There has to be consideration for the other person, whether you're leaping ahead to something or a conclusion they might not be ready or prepared for. So this kind of what I call an attunement is a very fine attributory sense to this metasphere dimension and Wildslash, to have a sense of the space and the way in which we are connecting, and then this world dwelling, to me, in theory, then has the opportunity to open up, and done so in a nice way. So we're actually actualizing the potentials, that which from the different perspectives can be shared, and then there might be some agreement to go further or not, or to work out what needs to be addressed. So you look at the most fair and equitable ways and to have these kind of quality interactions that then hopefully, quote unquote, raise consciousness, right? This is what the goal would be. So we live better informed lives. We have the opportunity to create a desired sustainable future that is equitable and fair and has social justice. Things in the way that we um, have worked through things so we can finally rise above them, and we are free of the shackles of the past or that which inhibited us. So that's one of the words, metasphere. And then I had Weltslosh. And I look at things as bringing into a quality conversation ideas that need a terminology that don't really exist in any language that I've found. And I use acronyms because they're an easy way to remember them, right? They become devices to sort of attribute an idea to that then expresses something that allows really what I hope is egalitarian, and it is enlightening in the way like, oh, the consideration becomes a foundation or something that, as approached, can be considered and then widens this awareness. That's the goal. All right, let's see how I'm doing on time. Yeah, it's pretty good. I think we can end here. I took this in two parts, so I'm not quite remembering everything I did in the first part this morning. But I wanted to introduce something to sort of bring it around, that the Project for Loving Conversations is bringing the best of this work. And I will talk about some ideas that, as a foundation, you want to create the metasphere that I describe as a REC principle, and a separate talk on that, WRECK, using one of those acronyms as a formula that elegantly brings down the past paradigm. Nobody gets hurt. It doesn't have to be, a heavy-duty conflict, fight, argument. It can be something that in this sort of realm, for fun, can be addressed in different ways, and we can wrestle with it. That can be fun, and some basic rules around that, right? We're not putting each other down. No fist fighting, karate chops, nothing like that. You're not throwing things at each other. Unless it's for fun, it's a Nerf ball or something. But I'm not into that. What was that term back in the 60s where people were beating up their pillows? I forget. Anyway, I wrote about all that kind of stuff way back in my grad work. But anyway, this is a new realm where we approach things a bit more elegantly. And the REC formula is to bring it down. The old paradigms, the institutions that imprison, do it in an elegant way so people aren't hurt, but they're brought around so they're considered, uh, nobody's disposable, nobody's left behind. And we're able to elegantly once again approach something where we can come back to it again and again because we may have fallen down, may have gotten off track, but because it's a practice of being present, and this is an evolution, so the more we practice, the more pristine we're able to be in the presence of things. This is the raising of consciousness in my esteemed view, because it's sort of, again, revelatory to where in this dimension, the world we're dwelling in, we're observing. And we're, more than anything, we're observing our way of being in this dwelling, right? In our conceptual mindset. Like, how am I presenting? What's my impressions? And addressing them in the way where I have to deal with it myself, but making sure it's not causing the conversation to go off track, go off rails, to where my false impression or what I'm identifying with doesn't, disturb sort of the semblance of what would be a constructive conversation, and keep it to that quality and expand on it, which is the goal. So the REC is one of those formulas. Also, I have the TIE principle, TIE, because you want to have a good relationship tie, a karma-free tie, and that's showing real consideration for the other person, that we're not invading someone's space, we're getting permission to have a moment, so it's time, interest, and energy, or the environment that things are sort of checked into, so it's like, okay, are we good here? And having that up front now isn't allowing, you're getting permission, so it's good, we're good to go, let's do it, and you have some framework around it. And again, it's very fair and equitable. There's more. I don't want to take up time doing that. I'll have separate conversations on that, but I think that makes my project kind of unique, because having this foundation, which so important to me, becomes really fair, inviting, and equitable, because we really do need your participation. And full on. It's not like, oh, you're reluctant to do it. You would now have everything that guaranteed or allotted, enabling you to participate. That would be the resources, and in this case for therapists and practitioners and counselors, training, certification, and really backed up by studies, things that we'll do ourselves, but additional research and references, and the input of other experts, so that it's really well-rounded. It's really very considerate, fair, and balanced. And, we want to make it in harmonic interaction. Otherwise, what's the purpose of doing this work? And I think the goal is really to help, people who are really stuck in difficult circumstances in their relationships. And the dynamic, it involves personal growth, owning up to things. If something is owed, something is due, something not reconciled with, attributed to, whether you're blaming somebody or you're at fault, that things get addressed if that's what's needed, and then to get past whatever the past is, so that the relationship can be furthered, or at least the ideals of it, and in this way to maximize the potential of helping other people, to consciously be a part of a community then that has this kind of conversation. So communityconversations.com was my graduate work, which is an independent movement. I didn't come up with the idea of community conversations. I got the domain, and that is potentially something of a future revisiting, to where we can bring community leaders together and help this dynamic more on a local empowerment scale. Loving conversations is really more the dynamic, could be with, family interactions, friends, relatives, people who you might have disagreement or some kind of wedge, that this would be a process that, again, is fair and equal, considering. So it's just in the way that it is presented and done, people just have the greatest experience of it. They get what they need out of it, and it works through whatever needs to be worked through, and has the position of being loving and caring. And that's the foundation of this work. All right, well, I hope that's something there for you. And as an explainer, lovingconversations.com is the project. It's a book proposal. Podcast is what this is, I suppose. I'm going to start interviewing people. This is still relatively in the new year. We're 6 weeks into 2023, and I want to sort of I needed to complete some things, and now I want to take it to the next level. So